Podcast Week. This is our October live stream, The Sounds of True Crime. We are so excited that you're here today. We have some amazing guests. My name is Norma Jean Belenke. I'm the head of events here at Podbean. I'm going to read our brief intro and then we will hand it off to our wonderful panel today. Welcome back, everyone, to Storytelling Podcast Week and our October Roundtable, The Sounds of True Crime, podcast sound design live panel featuring Brenda Ganske from the Horrifying History podcast and Carrie Arrick from Yaya Podcasting, hosted by Motzie Dapul of the High Night Podcast here on Podbean. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, Storytelling Podcast Week has live stream sessions like this one with top podcasters and storytellers from scripted fiction and nonfiction podcasts from across our world and our imaginations. We also have exclusive recorded episodes on the Storytelling Podcast Week podcast and on Podbean's official podcast, Podcasting Smarter. So make sure to check those out. The links are here in the description. Storytelling Podcast Week is brought to you by Podbean. We're a podcast hosting and monetizing platform and home to over 640,000 podcasts. To start your podcast, head over to podbean.com today. And now we'll jump in. Hello, Motzie. Hello, Brenda. Hello, Carrie. How's it going?
Hi.
Great.
Hello.
It's nice to see all of you.
Here we go.
Welcome, everybody. So just to reintroduce myself, my name is Motzie, and it's nice to meet you both, Brenda and Carrie. I think we're just going to start off with something really simple and fun, obviously. I'd love to hear about both your podcasts. I think we'll go by just alphabetical. No worries. Yeah. So we'll ask Brenda
You're a busy lady.
Yeah, everyone wants to talk to you. You're very popular.
I wish they'd stop.
No worries. Absolutely fine. But yeah, so we'll ask Brenda first. Brenda, can you please tell us a little more about your podcasting and a little bit about yourself as well? And then right after we will do a little bit of a clip for you. So go ahead.
Well, I'll start with Horrifying History. Horrifying History, we released it actually on Podbean in October of 2019. We just had our third anniversary. And I like to say it's the place where fact, history, lore, and supernatural collide. So on our show, basically how it works is we choose a topic and we tell the history and the legends about that topic. And we review any scientific evidence or historical documentation to give our audience all the information they need to have them decide where the truth actually lies. And we love telling a great spooky story along the way. So, as for myself, do I come from a career of podcasting? Nope. I started listening to podcasts only in 2018 because my girlfriend and her brother were starting a podcast themselves. And of course, I had to support my girlfriend. Friends support friends. And I listened to it, and I immediately fell in love with the genre. It's almost like I like to compare it to the world of when we just had terrestrial radio, and then we evolved to satellite. And when you had terrestrial radio, it was so controlled, for lack of better terms, and a lot of commercials, as we all know. But then when it came to satellite, it came to a world of more of you can actually say more, and there wasn't so many just like restrictions. But podcasting to me is almost an extension of that. And it allows like a normal person like me who's never podcasted in their life to go down into their dark, dank basement and create something really fun and cool for myself, which luckily turned into something else, something bigger. It grew its own life. So I actually, believe it or not, it was in healthcare for years, and actually went and worked frontline healthcare, moved into analytics, and I actually bring a lot of that to the show because our research is everything. And again, that's why we bring you guys the stories that you don't normally hear.
That's honestly amazing. And when you said have I been in a podcasting career? I feel like most of us have not.
No.
I think that's the magic of podcasting. I think there are very few people who were there from the beginning, and it's still a fairly new like medium, but definitely like one of the biggest growing and one of the biggest right now. Right before we talk about Carrie, and we will just play a clip from Brenda from Horrifying Histories. And yeah, we'll just play the clip right now.
If you like weird, spooky, and strange history, then I have the podcast for you. My name is Brenda, and I'm the host of Horrifying History. Are you into the dark side of history? Horrifying History tells you about the side of history that people don't normally talk about. We tell the tales of haunted places, infamous true crimes, the paranormal, and unsolved mysteries, and then we look to history to see where the truth actually lies. Want to get spooky with us? Get your Horrifying History fix by subscribing today on your favorite podcast provider or by going to our website at horrifyinghistory.podbean.com.
That is delightful.
Yeah,
That is
I'm
so
going to go
delightful.
subscribe.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
absolutely,
follow. I'm
yeah.
going to follow.
Me too. Yeah, so let's go. Let's just ask hello, Carrie. I know you're very popular, so thank you for your time today.
I'm really not. It's like the one time I get a text message, right?
But yes, thank you so much for joining us as well. Please tell us more about Yaya podcasting, and yeah, we'd love to hear more from you.
Yeah, so I started originally podcasting in 2014, and this is, like Brenda, this is not where I come from. And I fell in love with it, and I loved the post-production side and started doing it for other people in 2017. And in 2018, I went ahead and founded my company, Yaya Podcasting, and I have gotten to work with some phenomenal people, independent podcasts as well as productions for Sirius and iHeart. And what I mainly do is the editing and scoring and sound design and the mixing and mastering. And so the clip that I have to share with you today, unfortunately, I can't tell you the name of the podcast, and I can't tell you too much of what it's about, except for it's about murder. But I have it's a really cool show, and it should be coming out next year, which I will gladly share with you. But one of my loves has always been sound. So sound design, while surprisingly no background in music, and no background in audio at all, but I have always listened. So and I get nerdy about the science of it. So I just kind of fell in love with the sound design process, and I love to make things kind of scary and spooky and anxious and tense. So
That's so exciting. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing this clip with us. We can't so it's gonna play right now, so we can hear your mastery of the of the audio.
There was no key. Popped it off, broke the lock. I smell something that is, there's nothing that can describe it. It wasn't as strong. I don't know why, but maybe it was just because of how cold it was. I go over, I touch what I think is a mannequin. I'm like, what the hell is this? And then I looked down and realized he was wearing the same jacket that Crystal's father was wearing in the picture that's literally sitting above the mantle in the house. And it clicked for me. So I started screaming and crying. Immediately, whenever I saw him, I knew.
Spooky. Oh, that's so exciting. I know you can't share too much about the details, but yeah, it's very exciting to hear what is coming up. And even though you said that, again, you don't have like a history in podcasting before you started, for 2014, you're almost podcast old blood, and that's kind of like for a young medium like this, that still means a lot. That's like the first big rise, I think, of
yeah,
podcasting.
yeah.
You know,
And I
like
started,
there were definitely. Mhm. Oh, sorry,
yeah,
go
I
on.
started listening well before that. And my favorite podcast retired. So I was like
Mhm.
Brenda said, you can just pick up the microphone, go down into your basement and make something, that you love.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that because, as with both of you, I also had no podcasting experience when I started, which was 2020, which is, I think, a lot of people's starts in the podcasting community. My particular title is a fiction audio drama about it's basically, we thought it would be a fun horror podcast. We did not expect it to be scary. And then when people started listening to it, they were like, why didn't you tell me it was scary? I'm like, so that's the wonder of the medium. Yeah, so I will ask a couple of fun questions about audio sound editing, essentially, which is what people are here for. And I hope you guys can give me a lot of really interesting information. For the first question, which is, tell us a little more about tell us a bit more about the production, sound design, that sense of like fear that inspires your work. And I think I'll ask Carrie to go first for this one. Go ahead, Carrie.
So in terms of production, and I am speaking more kind of the corporate side, but I would do this for my own podcast, is, everything starts with a script. And hopefully whoever has written the script has kind of thought about the sound design like a little bit, or sounded like oops or sounded or like has an idea of what they want that sound to be, whether it's sound effects and music. Typically they have a sense of that. They don't always. So I have to really think, I have to read all the scripts. So that's really where I started, reading all the scripts and figuring out in my own head, what is their vision and how do I translate that sonically. And then I get into really the listening, right? I will edit the dialogue, and then I will go and have a moment with some music, right? And I try to pick that one piece, that like theme song. So in that clip, you heard after all that drama, there was this guitar that came in at the end and took us out. That's actually the first part of the theme song for this podcast. So that was actually picked later, but I had picked a piece of music, and that's really my starting point for what the sound is going to be like. What are the elements in that song, and then how do I, or I find different pieces of music that kind of fit sonically, harmonically, with rhythm, that piece of theme music. And so I think the theme music is super critical because it really, allows you to have some guardrails, right? One of the biggest creative challenges, especially in this kind of work, is like there's so much to choose from, right? It's so easy to go and listen to 100 pieces of music and you're like, what? So that theme song, having that kind of defined for your show, gives you a lane to stay in and play with. It's enough. Like it's the smaller box of crayons that you have to go through to find the color. And then in terms of sound effects, it's really directed by like what I think first of all, what's in the script, but that's usually like, what are those dramatic moments? What scenes are you trying to create? What do you want the listener to feel with the sound effects? And I guess we'll talk more about sound effects later, but my inspiration really, I'm a big horror fan. I mean, I love horror. So being able to do this is kind of a dream come true. I do use, certain frequencies trigger fear and anxiety. And so I do use that in these shows. I love using it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And yeah, when you mentioned the theme songs, we definitely like the first thing, or like first step in creating like the story and the mood was the theme song. So I don't totally get what you mean. We will go into a little more about forming tension with certain sounds. But first, we'll ask Brenda, like, what inspires you? Like, what do you put into specifically the editing side? Because I believe you also host as well. So what inspires you when you are forming the episode in the first place?
Actually, I'm going to go back in time to when I was starting and actually trying to figure out what I wanted to do to begin with, to be honest with you. And when I originally had started, I was thinking, do I go with two hosts? Do I go with one host? How do I want to do it? And I originally thought, okay, I'm going to go a single host because this is going to sound very silly, but when I go, I do everything from writing scripts to hosting all the way through the production end. Basically, every episode you guys are seeing is me in a nutshell. And when going back to what I wanted for story ideas, even just story ideas, what our listeners are hearing are tales and subjects that I've always been interested in, and I just wanted to dig into more. I've always, just like Carrie said, I've always loved creepy stories, but I always found that truth is scarier than fiction for the most part, for me anyway. So I also get a lot of things that our fans send us. So, and again, looking into that, and if it interests me, we go forward with it. But when you're going into the production side, from day one, I was very conscious of what I wanted. And this is, again, it's going to sound very silly, but what I do is I actually literally imagine myself that we're around a campfire and telling spooky stories. And how do I bring that feel of a campfire storytelling thing, event as a kid to audio? And I always have that in the back of my mind. So when I'm writing the story or the scripts or what have you, I always write it in a way that you build up and then you hit the middle and then I put in a break just to, again, well, if I were to put advertising in, but more importantly, just to kind of make the apex and then drop them a bit. And then we start in the second half to bring them up again. I find that emotion is what brings people back. It's people, it doesn't matter what podcast you have. It could be, talking about taxes, or it could be mom hints, or it could be talking about reality TV. We're all here to tell a story. And so I think that starts second one with writing and what that script is and how it in the writing brings people to feel an emotion at a certain time. Second step is using my voice to actually bring that in. So, for example, if you're telling a story and you're starting to, and then they're walking into the room and they open the door and then they see, it's how you use your voice. And that's what a skill that voice actors had that I had to learn. But then also, again, as Carrie was saying, it comes when you're looking at production side, you add the music in there. And when I add the music, I usually have music going in the background at all times. It's very similar, not similar, same sort of instrumental as my theme, but those were chosen very specifically, again, to give the idea of creepy story time. And one thing that I hear so many times, and it's crazy, that it's like I'm a kindergarten teacher telling the worst stories you could actually imagine. And I'm like, there, success. That's exactly what I wanted. I wanted it to be a dark, creepy story time that when you stop listening to that episode, you don't want to hear more, but you kind of really need to hear more. And that's all done, again, strategically through music, through using my voice in certain ways, pausing at certain places where you should, not pausing. And that, again, something comes with time for most podcasters, but with me being an individual, it kind of came a little quicker, I think. Because when you have a second host, it's again, you're bouncing off a person, so it's a different feel.
Yeah, totally. And I'm fascinated by like how much how many like different aspects of what's supposedly just one medium, but it's like multiple what do you call them, multiple disciplines put together. Sorry, I keep like gesturing and I hit my microphone there. But yeah,
I do it all the time.
I feel that. But yeah, just all these disciplines that come together. As you mentioned, editing is not only editing, but like also just going through archives of like music and sounds, being a voice actor, that sort of thing, being a performer. This is much more complicated than people may think. Listening to a person talk on a microphone. But speaking of complicated, I did want to seg into this interesting question. I want to specify it a little more because Carrie mentioned that there are certain sound effects that form tension, and in the back end, Carrie also mentioned that there are specific frequencies that form tension. And I think this is going to be very useful for a lot of people who are getting into not just horror but also suspense and that sort of thing, to know the almost mathematical equation of these of the sounds that it takes to make somebody tense. So I would love to hear about that, Carrie.
Yeah. So sound is like vibration. So you can actually feel it. Right. And that's always good to remember when you're sound designing. And Dallas Taylor of 20,000 Hertz once said about sound designers, like, if you don't feel it, then I'm not going to hire you. So that's my. I love him. That's a great show to listen to on sound design, by the way, or sound. So 19 hertz specifically is a sound that causes people or it's a frequency that causes people anxiety, right? And then if you enhance that, so you have, and you can get these on sound effects, libraries, places like Audio Hero, any place that sells sound effects, should have. It's called a fear frequency, essentially. And we use them in sound design all the time to like make people literally uncomfortable. It's that little extra, right? So you've got like everything Brenda talked about. You have the tension, you have the, somebody who's really skilled at like acting and doing all that. And then you've got the music and whatever sound effects. And then you just put that little bit of icing on top to like drive it home. And then the other thing that you can do, and I do this with music as well, is if you cut at 442 hertz, 442 hertz is like the comfort frequency. It's a frequency that like is almost like mathematically perfect. It makes you feel good, and it's used a lot in healing. So if you cut that frequency out, then again, you're upping the discomfort and that anxiety piece. And it's just that little like, so that's your glitter on your sound design cake, your edible glitter. But knowing kind of the science and how frequency and which frequencies, because there's a lot more. I mean, there's frequencies are very interesting. So just kind of reading up on those ways, those frequencies, and how to use them to make people feel good or feel bad. Because you can play on the tension and release, right? Because I feel like basically what we're doing as storytellers, whether it's making the whole podcast as an independent podcaster, or whether it's just being part of a production, is you are creating moments of exertion and rest for the listener, right? So that, and I don't know where I was going with that. So, but so I'll end it there.
You've given us so much interesting information, and I kind of want to. It's so funny that you both keep giving really wonderful segues into the next source question. Very natural.
How lovely of us.
It's awesome. It makes my job easier for sure. But yeah, so this particular segue is about music. Although I will ask Brenda on that note in terms of like, we'll kind of like do a half question here. So I will ask Brenda, like, what do you have any like other little tips and tricks? You already mentioned like changing your voice, the mood of the story, that sort of thing. Are there any other small tips and tricks that you would like to share that add tension or add like horror, or even like remove tension when you want it? And then right after that, because this is the next question, which we'll ask Carrie right after, any specific like sound effects or music genres that you particularly enjoy putting in your episodes?
Well, as I was mentioning before, again, my situation's a little different than Carrie's because I'm the do all be all of horrifying history, really. And with our podcast, we tell all sides of a story from the logical to the supernatural. So with that alone, it allows us to create an emotion, a different emotion at different times. And again, it starts with the writing process, and it starts with how you write it, and then it goes into how you're saying it or you're narrating it. Now, with again starting out with more of the logical side, you tell the situation. Let's just say it's a true crime. You tell about the incident. There is ways to tell an incident to make it more suspenseful. There are ways versus just telling. It's not like you're reading a newspaper. It's all in your wording and how you use it, and then how you use your voice, your pitch, your tone, speeding things up, slowing it down, or adding in those little sound effects here and there where people wouldn't necessarily expect it. Or, for example, like if you have like your let's use the Watcher movie that's on Netflix and popular right now. I did an episode on that, and when I had the letters, I didn't just read the letters. I actually altered the sound to make it sound more you couldn't tell whether it was a female or male, and I added a little bit of a dark, creepy tone to it to allow a person to start thinking, "Oh my God, who could this be?" We don't even know, and it's just little tricks like that. What I suggest to everybody when they're starting out is literally just think about what you're doing. In a sense, you're not he- I don't see myself as here as in podcasting to become the next millionaire. I'm here to tell a story and tell it well. And if you tell a story well, there's a lot of different elements to it, as we already discussed, and a lot of it does come with pitch and tone and frequency. But also, it is the creepiness of the music that is, and you change that. A lot of people I know just run the same background music. That's great, but it works for them. But for me, I don't do that. Mine ebbs and flows, and it ebbs and flows when the certain points of suspense is coming up, and down we go. What my goal is to make a listener have a feeling, and it's with anything. If you're sitting and talking, for example, if you're talking to an audience, an auditorium of 1,000 people, you can go and say a speech on pencils for it, and they'll sit there and they'll listen and they'll drink their coffee and that's it. But if you tell it in a way that you make that pencil so exciting that you have to have the next best pencil, it's almost like you're selling the story to your audience. But you're selling it in a way to make them feel, because if they feel nothing, they're not going to go listen to your second episode. It's as simple as that. And I've always been a storyteller in my life, without being a professional one. But I just brought that in and cranked it up a little bit. And it's actually kind of funny. One of the things I always think about in the back of my head is Dwayne Johnson. And I was watching this episode of him on Titan Games because I love the guy, who doesn't. And they were actually talking about his persona. And I actually created a persona. So who you're talking to right now is not who you get in my episodes. I actually put on the suit in my mind of my persona, which is a dark, creepy girl, like a ghost walking through a graveyard, and you just have to follow her. She's so alluring. And then, she rips your face off. But the point of it is, I have to put on the persona to get in that mood and feel and bring that forward to my listeners. And what The Rock said is the best persona that you ever can make is you just cranked up about 200%. And that's what you get. You get the girl who's in her basement who likes the creepy stuff and loves reading Stephen King, just cranked up 250%, but in the same time using her voice to be able to tell a story well. And that's the best thing I could recommend to anybody. Be a character, but be that character of you, and think about the people that are listening and what they would want to hear and how they want that story told. And with that, I found worked out for me.
I have a quick
for everybody.
question. Yeah,
Mhm.
Brenda, did
Absolutely,
you
go
like
ahead.
take and do any like training with because I have a huge respect for actors and voice actors that, because I mean, it's not easy. So did you take any training or any courses, anything like that?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Now, the funny thing is, my girlfriend, whose show that I started listening to, she asked me to be a guest, and her brother is a professional voice actor, and that's her co-host. And they asked me to come on and tell a little creepy story, and I'm like, okay. And as soon as we got off the air, her brother went and said to me, "I can't believe you're not a voice actor." He says, you tell a story so well, but at the same time, when you're telling it, he says, you can't help but listen. And he says, you become enraptured. And he goes, and you just told the worst stuff ever. And it's okay. And he says, really, I just don't know how you do it. And I said, I guess I'm a natural storyteller. I have no idea. But it worked out for me well. I'm just lucky, I guess.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah,
But
it is.
but in all seriousness, I couldn't do it unless I put on that persona. That's my trick.
I love
Mhm.
that. I love that.
Yeah. I heard a bit of it. It's very lady of like evening lady, dark lipstick, guiding you
Yeah.
through a graveyard,
The
exactly as you
goth
said.
girl going through the
Mhm.
graveyard. I even had my promotional shots done, and I found a photographer, and I'm like, okay, I have an idea. You need to take pictures of the persona, and I explained it to her, and I'm like, I'm gonna just send you some pictures of ideas. And
Mhm.
I said, that is what I want. I don't want people to see me when I'm on air or when my pictures are out there. I want them to see the persona to keep that feel carried over to the episode. And she's brilliant. This photographer was brilliant, and she actually took the picture for my logo. And that was when it was a hot summer day, and I'm just sitting there in the graveyard, because we did go in the graveyard. And I'm just sitting there leaning against the stone saying, why did I wear a leather bustier? This is the stupidest thing I've ever done.
Oh my
And
goodness.
but that is
That sounds
why
horrible.
but I think that's why she got the look of polite death in my eyes.
Polite death.
That's so true.
Because I thought I was about to die. but needless to say, those who know me get a kick out of my podcast. They love hearing it because they know me, and then they know the persona, and they absolutely love the persona.
That is awesome. Yeah, the personality is like what brings people back, I'm sure. It's like so that's what makes it. Like people will just like hear a person that some even if it's character or even if it's the person, as you said, like cranked up to 11. Once they resonate, they're gonna keep coming back no matter what. It's great. It's
And
wonderful advice for anybody.
And I actually watched an interview with Ryan Reynolds, because who doesn't love Ryan Reynolds? And he actually
Mhm.
suffers from generalized anxiety disorder. And I suffer from that too. And you're thinking, Ryan Reynolds, seriously? And he actually says when he does interviews, he mentally puts on Deadpool. His persona is Deadpool.
No.
And as soon as I
Mhm.
heard that, I'm like, that's how I'm going to do it. And honestly, it works very well for me because it puts me in a completely different mindset. And
Mhm.
it allows for me to record easier wearing the persona, for lack of better terms. When I'm not in that headset, I really can't record. But once I kind of mentally put on the Deadpool suit, I'm good to go.
It's almost like a costume. Like this is
A little
Yeah.
a
bit.
Halloween or something.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
Yeah. Mhm. You might have noticed that some of us, obviously Brenda is wearing the wonderful like little skeleton, and Carrie is wearing the lovely little ears matching her adorable cat in the background there. Um, I didn't have a costume for this particular one, so I just grabbed knitting no face, and he's just hanging out today. So that's what this was the
Aw.
entire time. But yeah, so I did want to ask because I'm intrigued by back to Carrie, and I just want to like say I'm intrigued by the concept of just using music in podcasting, and I'm sure a lot of people will want to ask this as well, because one of the biggest I think hurdles a lot of people have to get over. If they're smart, like if they're smart, is knowing what music can be used. Like, unless they're musicians who can make their own music, and how wonderful would that be? Um, there is a very big looming specter of the copyright machine
Yeah.
that exists over us all. And I think this is a good question for both what kind of music you like to use, and also like where do you get it? Because like your music, your sound effects, less so the sound effects, but still
Yeah.
in a way where it's easier to kind of both navigate the rights and also find something completely perfect for your episode, for your work.
Yeah. So this is really important. I was a graphic designer in my past life, and I knew graphic designers back on, when message boards were cool. They were making those little signature tags, and they used Disney characters. right? And they were making them for free for other people as well. And Disney went around and sued all of them for copyright infringement. And they were, they weren't making any money off of it. So I don't mess with copyright at all. So what I do, I love Audio Hero. And they, I have a gazillion credits, and now they do like a subscription plan that's not very expensive. And I go for I read the licenses of everything. I read the entire license of what I am getting, because on a stock music site, and there are lots of them, you just search royalty free music, and usually you can get the music and sound effects catalogs out there. But you got to read the licenses, because some of them you can't make any money off of the production. Some of them say you can only have like 5,000 downloads, right? You can only this whatever you create with that piece of music now can only be downloaded 5,000 times, and who wants that? And some of them require credit and like backlinks. So there's all these different terms that can be in an individual license, even from the stock sites. There are now, one of the reasons I like Audio Hero is because they have different levels of licenses you can buy. And so if you buy like kind of the unlimited license, and then it's all the same for every sound that's in their library. And so that, so I can read one license, and the only thing that's changed is a piece of music. So copyright is super important, right? You wouldn't want somebody to take your podcast, repackage it somehow, and then like put it out in the world as their own, right? Or, so that's another reason to like take copyright very seriously.
I actually 100% agree on that. And just with what you said, that actually happened to me. It was last summer that was happening a lot with not Podbean, because you guys are awesome, but another provider. And it was out in the news that people were downloading other shows' episodes, not even making a change, and then even taking their logos and uploading that as their own. And that's just a whole world of legal stuff that you never should walk into. It happened to me, and that is why my logo changed. So I actually had a logo. I was really happy with it. Someone stole my logo and changed the show name to something very similar, which I won't say. But I thought that's really, really not nice to do, because I worked hard on that. And that's going back to what you're saying. Some people, when it comes to music and sound, somebody actually created that. They sat in their dark basement and did that. So realistically, just to take that is not, for me, ethical. So that's why my logo got changed to my face, but it also got my face altered, as you guys seen on the screen. Because I thought no one can steal my face, right?
Exactly.
and going with that, the same sort of idea is, if you create your own sound, my recommendation is for you to either copyright it yourself and make sure you protect your own intellectual property. And I've taken those steps too after that, because I thought, who the heck's going to steal my stuff? Well, somebody tried and they stole my logo. Mm-hmm. So I do know some shows that had actual full episodes stolen from them. And to me, that would be devastating as a creator who put all this work into it. Again, I do everything. It would be devastating to me. So I 100% agree on what you're saying. Just again, legalities of it. You really could get in serious trouble. Yes. But also the ethical side of it. Are you really producing what you really want if you're stealing it?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And there are some people that just don't care, and that's like, it's kind of dangerous for a lot of people who do care. I will share like a small anecdote, and also just my source, because I do enjoy the freesound.org, which actually does like provide, you don't have to subscribe or anything, but I do give them like a monthly donation for the amount of help that they have given me. The nice thing about Freesound is that you also get like, you can filter by specific copyright. So I would always filter by Creative Commons 0, which is basically just like, use it however you like. There are certain Creative Commons where you can use it, but not for profit. Like as Carrie said, you have to really read it. You have to read the
Yes.
fine print. You have to familiarize yourselves with these terms like Creative Commons, Creative Commons Zero, et cetera, et cetera. They're pretty easy to remember once you know them. And the other thing is, and this is a very funny one, I did mention that some of my characters have a very specific love of 1920s jazz, pre 1924, because that is the that is the limitation of a copyright.
I knew where you were going with
So
that.
So I found like specific artists that I was like, or active like in the early 1900s, and then one of my characters is a big fan of Bessie Smith, and I did have an experience where I uploaded an episode to YouTube, and YouTube said no, this is like copyrighted music, and we stopped uploading to YouTube for a second, and then like about 2 months later we uploaded again, because what had happened was that the copyright for that had ended in 2022, and we were trying to upload in 2021, and as soon as we uploaded in 2022 it was fine. So there are some, if you feel like as a creator that there isn't enough like there aren't sources of music, there are people who have Creative Commons Zero music that you can use. There are a lot of sources like much older than like public domain music that you can use. And there's also in our more recent episodes we've been using Tchaikovsky, because Tchaikovsky and classical music especially, that is much older than like 100+ years, can do a lot for forming like a certain mood. It's very versatile. A lot of people think it's only one thing, but classical music is so widespread that it's good to consider like looking into that as well. So there's lots of choices. Like if you feel a little bogged down by all the limitations, there's still lots of choices that you have. And it's a good thing to talk about as sound editors as well as like podcasters. So we're kind of, we're hitting like almost we've been talking for a little while and it's been wonderful. I will say like I'll go on to the very fun questions here. I hope you have been having fun so far.
Yeah.
But these have all been very informative. I do want to ask like for both for Brenda and Carrie, if you'd like to chime in as well, how would you I'm sorry. Let me just start again. How do you curate? Well, not curate. How do you sorry. How do you cultivate audience engagement? Like, how do you cultivate your fans, your listeners? How do you interact with people who have become like fans of your show, who have listened to your show, whether they're fans of you specifically or the shows you've worked on, or et cetera, et cetera? How do you cultivate that, especially for new podcasters? Like that seems like the most daunting thing, to get an audience. So a little bit of like advice, a little bit of experience that you've had would be very helpful. For Brenda, I'll ask Brenda first, and then ask Carrie as well.
Well, that's actually funny, because when I started my podcast, and I think this is kind of what everybody should go into it, everyone goes in and thinks that they're going to make $1 million, or it's just a fun time to hang out with your friends. That's not how I went into it at all. I'm very much a person that when I go into something, I'm going to research the heck out of it, and I'm going to absolutely frame it the best way I can, in the sense that I'm going to do the best product I could. And I think and going back to sound, if you create the best sounding product you can and create all these other elements we're talking about, that itself, when you're having quality product, is really a big help. But again, that doesn't necessarily originally drive people there. I honestly thought when I put out my first 4 episodes, the only person who's going to listen is my mom, because she had to. So that was my attitude, really. But as time went, and all of a sudden my first episodes came out and people listened, I'm like, what just happened here? People from what? People from across the world want to hear me? That's crazy to me. So I did have a strategy going in, and a lot of the strategy has to do with, firstly, I always think of the listener experience with the episode itself. When I'm starting to even think topics, I think about things that are a little bit more obscure, or if it's a topic that's well known that a person wants to hear about, I look for the data, the information that's appealing for story or telling, but I also frame it differently than another show. I find a lot of shows out there, it seems to be the same stuff. So you have to find a niche to really stand out. And my niche is looking at the paranormal true crime, but the historical dark side and interconnecting them all and looking at paranormal and these true crime as like a case. I used to be an analyst, right? So I look at it and frame it all the way around. And that is one reason why we stand out. So that's why, to me, research is absolutely vital to make you stand out. That's when you're going to learn out about all the nuances that the other shows, if you're talking in the same topic, wouldn't know about. And it's also really important to present that information. So, as I mentioned before, people need to have an emotion. And when they have that emotion, they're more likely to stay. And the key is ultimately to get them to hit that subscribe button and want them to hear more. And that's a big thing about it. Now, the one thing that turns me off of a podcast, to be honest with you, is bad sound quality. In the sense of nobody wants to hear your dishwasher running in the background or my dog that's upstairs hiding so you don't hear him in the background. It really just takes away from the message you're trying to put out there. But it shouldn't be about just delivering your content and calling it a day. Now, I'm a big script writer, and the reason is I find a lot of podcasts, when they are just doing it one-on-one, they really go off track. They just right off that topic. I am a script writer, so I keep me on track, and I write it in a way to pique interest. But when you're looking into other little nuances that I do, I also use the opportunity at the end of every episode to pique their interest for the next episode, to kind of give them a little taste of what's to come and want to come back and hear about it. And I also use a lot of terminology like my spooky friends and my dear listeners to personalize it. I find that podcasting, the listeners are very loyal, and they, after our time, feel like they get to know you. So if you give them a little piece of information, for example, I was talking about the Isdal woman case out of Norway. And when I was talking about it, one of the theories about it is literally that a hairspray can could have exploded and caused her to combust. And I told a story. He says, let me explain why I don't believe that to be true. So I told a story. When I was a child, I thought it was a great idea to make a big bonfire and throw some hairspray cans in and see what happened. Totally did it. And I ran and jumped behind a building, thank God, because the shrapnel went everywhere. And I said, to prove the point that I don't think it's a hairspray can is the fact that there was no shrapnel found. And as I tried with my personal experience when I was 6 years old, you would have shrapnel everywhere. So it's little things like this that really just allows your listener to resonate a bit more with the tale, because they're getting to know you a bit more. And at the same time, they feel like they're a little bit of the part of the story when you do that, and they're part of your life a little bit. And it helps bring a little bit more of a stronger listenership. But then I did what everybody else does, of course. I interconnected with other podcasts. I put out my promo a lot of different ways, but networking in this community is vital. Knowing, and I'm not saying like you have to know the next Joe Rogan or anything like that, but interconnecting with the same type of podcasters, the same basis story that you have, and share promos with each other, and listen to what they're doing, and seeing if you like it or not and how you can incorporate it. To me, in the beginning, that was absolutely vital. And it's really where we found success right away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, as you mentioned, like in terms of networking, I think a good thing would be to know your audience and kind of like a targeted audience. Like, even if other people you don't expect will love your stuff, you do have to at least look at who you think will love your stuff the most and kind of look into them, like be in their spaces, that sort of thing, and catch people's attention. Know podcasts similar to you, and kind of get people's attention through that as well. I think is very important. Carrie, did you have any information that you want to share as well?
Yeah, so I'm gonna look at this in two ways. And the first one is sound. So it's about using that sound to have the listener lean in, and then get really granular with it, and then give them moments to lean out and process it. And that can be done as simply as with like silence and pacing, right? And it doesn't have to be super fancy, but you want to give
Mhm.
them the opportunity to kind of go along on the journey and then take a little rest and process what they just heard. And I think that's really the foundation of what we do. It's storytelling, right? It's just with sound. And then everything Brenda said, awesome. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I would even like maybe a simpler way for somebody, like, I'm very introverted and I don't always like to be social. But I find when I do things like this, or when I go talk to other podcasters, and especially about sound, I'm excited, right? And so I think when it comes to like getting your audience engaged, I think they respond to that excitement. I think part of the reason what Brenda was saying about telling her little anecdote is because it was, kind of exciting for you, right? And that was then emotion was transferred to the listener, and then they got a little peek into gee, what kind of person are you? You're the
Oh,
kind of
come
person who's
on.
like,
It
yeah.
sounded like a great idea when I was 6 years old. Come on.
Exactly. No.
She survived. She's still here.
Survived to tell the tale, right? It's totally on brand. But like, and that's it. Just have fun, be social, talk to people. Don't just like yell, oh, new show, here's the link, go listen. But that doesn't, like, everybody's doing that. You need to
Yes.
actually be in that community that you're serving, be active, be helpful, and have fun, and share the excitement and the love you have for your topic and for podcasting.
Exactly. I will share a little bit because I do have a Discord server, and a lot there are like many people on the Discord server, but a handful who are always there. And I do, whenever somebody is messaging, whenever somebody is like talking at all, even when it's to just talk about something they're interested in, even if it's not related to the podcast, I still respond. I'll be like, yeah, because every single listener is so valuable.
Yes.
You cannot get like a big head about this and expect to be like a big name unless you value every single person who is like really giving their time to you. And
Absolutely.
it doesn't, and when you get bigger, obviously you can't have time for literally everybody, but to care about your audience is gonna go a long way for sure. And just a small thing, and I think this is gonna sound cheap to a lot of people, but I do think it's very good advice. When you are quote unquote selling your podcast, or at least encouraging people to listen to your podcast, you have to be able to on the fly know a similar podcast to yours or a similar medium to yours, because people who don't know your podcast will have no frame of reference. And if you should provide that frame of reference, an example would be for us, we went semi-viral right before we released our first episode, because we were saying that we are somewhat similar to the Magnus Archives, which is a very big name podcast in the audio drama sphere. And people might think like, oh, you're just trying to ride on somebody's coattails. And honestly, when you are starting out, you need to give people that information. You need to understand that people don't know you and they don't know what your podcast is about. And in order to get them in the door to decide whether or not they think this is this is worth their time, you have to give them that context. And it is very important for the new audience and for people who don't know you to know you in that small way. And it also shows that you understand your own podcast, because if you cannot think of anything similar enough to your podcast to tell other people, that means you don't really understand your own podcast. And that can be a very bad thing.
Yeah. And I
yes.
just want to, so like, when you're pitching a podcast to a network, literally that's one of the tricks, is to like reference another podcast. So
especially a very big podcast, a very successful one.
one that like everybody's gonna know. And I will say, like, though I work in corporate podcasting, I also work with indie podcasters too. And I will say, when it comes to podcasting and being able to get an engaged audience, like especially in more creepier stuff, I really think that indie podcasters have it down. Like, I don't think they do it quite as well in corporate. So don't fire me.
Thank you so much. We won't tell anybody. We won't tell anybody. But yeah, I do want to say, like, do we have time for one more question, Norma? I think it's the nice ending question. So I will ask this last question for everybody, which is things you're allowed to talk about. What are you most excited about? And can you tell us about the future things you want to promote right now? Let's go with Carrie first, and then Brenda.
So I am excited about a couple projects. One of them is an independent project, and it's in partnership with the Uncovered Network, and it is being produced by the host of Technically Human, and it's really taking a look at technology solving the crimes of young children who are of color and whose cases just kind of get swept under the rug. So that I'm really excited about. And then I am hopefully, fingers crossed, going to be working on season 2 of Major Frequencies, which is an audible original, and that's just kind of like sound yumminess. That I'm excited. And I'm not the sound designer, I'm just the dialogue editor. I get to work with a phenomenal sound designer, so I'm excited about that.
What about you, Brenda?
Well, okay. Firstly, I'm going to still go with the fact that I've been doing this for 3 years and I'm still shocked that people listen. I still can't get over the fact that I've been able to, with this podcast, build a community, for lack of better terms. And I'm really proud of the community of listeners we have. They're amazing people. And whenever they reach out to me, either social media or email, what have you, I reach out back to them. And I think that itself, for them, makes them very loyal, that they know you care. But with that said, what's upcoming, I can't really talk a lot about it, but our second podcast is now in development, and more about that's coming in the new year. So it is going to be, we originally had a plan, I called it the trifecta, and the HHU, Horrifying History Universe. So our YouTube channel was one piece. The Horrifying History podcast, another piece, and then the second podcast is going to be coming out in the new year. We're actually script writing and everything right now, and I'm bringing in a host, so that is totally different for me. So that's actually pretty exciting, and what we're going to be producing is quite different. So I can't wait to see what people think of it. But I'll be very honest with you guys. I'm just really excited about the right now. I'm just really, again, being indie, I am just so darn lucky to be able to tell people stories from a living in my basement. I really am. How many people wish that they could do that? I honestly just thought this was going to be a hobby, probably put out 4 episodes and I'll just go to Podcast Never Neverland and just say I tried it and that's it. I never expected 3 years later and still be here and absolutely loving telling stories, interacting with people who are telling and listening to spooky stories. That's just my favorite part of podcasting, is that community we built with it, and finding out there's weird people like me in the world that really love the same stuff. I also love that. We also are doing some interesting things with the group that we have. Again, one of our big things we're putting out for Halloween, it's, believe it or not, a 2.5-hour episode of I'd say about 20 some podcasters telling all their dark stories around a campfire. And the virtual campfire. And so I'm pretty excited about that, to think of hear what people think about it, because literally it's a whole bunch of different genres coming together, and which normally you just have, like, for example, paranormal shows or true crime shows. We're going and really encompassing a big group. So it's going to be interesting how that turns out.
That's amazing. That's so exciting. Yeah. And yeah, for the last bit, I wanted to share, like, we are doing High Night, 31 Nights of High Night on our YouTube channel. It is every single episode leading up to the final Halloween episode that's coming out, not on Halloween, on the day before Halloween, Sunday. But yeah, like, if you like scary stories, I mean, if you like a scripted horror audio about a woman who lives in Toronto and somehow knows how to handle, like, all of these terrifying things, listen to High Night. And with that, I'm so grateful to have been able to talk to both of you. I think No Face is also very happy. And Carrie, before we go, I just wanted to say you used to work in graphic design. I actually work in animation right now,
Oh,
so I
okay.
totally I remember when Disney, like, well, anyway, I
Yeah.
won't say
Yeah.
anything more than that. But yeah, I remember.
Oh
for sure.
goodness, we'll have to have a chat after the live.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
I'm going to read our brief outro. Happy Halloween, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Once again, thank you everyone for joining us for this live stream, our October roundtable, The Sounds of True Crime, podcast sound design live panel featuring Brenda Ganske from the Horrifying History podcast and Carrie Arrick from Yaya Podcasting, hosted by Motzie Dapul of the High Night Podcast here on Podbean. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, Storytelling Podcast Week has live stream sessions like this one with top podcasters and storytellers from scripted fiction and nonfiction podcasts from across our world and our imaginations. We also have exclusive recorded episodes on the Storytelling Podcast Week podcast and on Podbean's official podcast, Podcasting Smarter. If you join late or want to have another listen to these amazing podcasters and storytellers, you can replay this live stream on Podbean's YouTube channel as well. Storytelling Podcast Week is brought to you by Podbean. We're a podcast hosting and monetizing platform and home to over 640,000 podcasts. To start your podcast, head over to podbean.com today. Thank you for joining us and stay tuned for the next live panel from Storytelling Podcast Week and Podbean. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Happy Halloween.
Happy
Halloween.
Halloween.